Okay, good morning. My name is Gary Matsuoka, and we're here at Laguna Hills Nursery on Saturday morning, end of September. This is the time of year when we start, didn't leave myself a copy here. We start talking about bare root trees coming in January. So we have a list of bare root trees that we sell. You don't have to reserve them this early, however, the main thing we like to tell everyone is if you reserve them before they come, we pick out the nicest ones for you. So we get in, 1,200, 1,300, probably about end up with 1,400 bare root trees. And even though they're grown the same way, they don't come out the same. So they plow them out of the ground. They have slightly different branch structures. Nature just does that. And the biggest and nicest shaped ones are the hardest ones to get into our display. So we usually reserve those, pull them aside, and anyone who special ordered them gets the nicest one of the bunch. So we do that. And there's a few items that we tend to run out of every year. The growers don't grow enough of them to supply our demand, our customers' demand. So if you pre-order them early, then you make sure you get one. So, and those are usually persimmon trees, sometimes the jujubes, a few things like that. Okay, so the thing to know about the deciduous fruit tree. So basically, in January, we sell deciduous fruit trees as bare root. They come from we're getting them from one company right at the moment, Dave Olson Nursery, who's the largest supplier of bare root trees probably in the United States. We used to have 3 suppliers 15 years ago, and one by one they've gone out of business, some from the drought, some from family problems. So, and in fact, in the future, we hope to pick up a couple more bare root suppliers so we have a quote, more reliable source. So, okay, so we get bare root trees, and when they come in, most of them would be about, the average size would have a trunk about this big. They come actually usually about 8 foot tall, but we don't want them that tall. So we trim them down to the height we want them to branch at. So most fruit trees, if you have a tree that's 8 foot tall that looks like a fishing pole and you put it in the ground, you'll have branches that you can't reach, which is not what we want. We want the fruit forming on branches that are lower on the tree so you can pick them easier. And all the orchards are going that way. So most commercial orchards will trim these stems down to about 18 inches when they put them in their field. Now, that's not all the case with all of them, but often they do that to force the branching low. Most of the bare roots nowadays, so 40 years ago, when I first started doing bare root, probably 45 years ago, most of the trees were just a single trunk, no branching. Nowadays, most of them come to us with at least one layer of branches. So the growers are doing a better job getting them branched out for our customers so they don't have to cut them as short as we used to. But it used to be that everything looked like fishing poles. And again, this is a 5/8 inch caliper trunk, and that's kind of a natural size that we get them in. Now, most of our fruit trees within a year would be about 8 to 10 foot tall and wide. You might be able to tell on these, we've cut these back twice this year. So this is a plum tree, and if we hadn't cut it back, it'd be about 11 foot tall. So from bare root, this might be called a 3/4 inch caliper now, but most of the trees we get are 5/8 to 3/4 inch caliper trunks, thickness of the trunk, and most of them can reach 8 foot the first year easily, if not bigger. The smallest ones we get in are about pencil thick. And even those will grow to about 6 feet the first year. And generally, if you ever talk to the orchard, people who buy them for the orchards, they don't usually recommend paying for anything bigger than pencil thick, which is 3/8 inch caliper, because they grow so fast, it's not worth the extra money to buy the bigger plants. For homeowners, we like the bigger ones because this has been in this pot about 8 months. 8 months, yeah, about 8 months, already has a crop. Where if it was pencil thick, it probably wouldn't have a crop on it. So, okay, the one thing to know is that the deciduous fruit trees come from climates of the world that have winters. Did I spell that right? Deciduous. Looks good. And most of the fruit trees we sell actually are from Asia. They originated in Asia. A few, now, Eurasia is one big continent. A few are from Central Asia, but most of them are from Eastern Asia. The vast majority of these. And the climate there is very similar to the climate in the eastern United States. So they have winters, they have snow, most of them come from snow country. So these trees are programmed to go to sleep in the winter. And interestingly, most references say they have a chill requirement that they have to meet to get fruit. Well, it turns out we've been doing this, I've been growing fruit trees since about 1980. And the only trees that absolutely need winter are the stone fruit, which are apricots, cherries, nectarines, peaches, plums, pluots, pleuries, apriums. If they don't get a winter, they don't make fruit. Or, sometimes they'll make one that year and you go, okay, that wasn't a good enough year. Whereas all these trees, mulberries, pomegranates, persimmons, interestingly apples, jujubes, and figs, most references will say they have a low chill requirement. We'll tell you that they don't need the chill to make fruit. Because we've had some winters the last 10 years, 12 years that have been hot. We had 2014, 90 degrees in December, 90 degrees in January. We couldn't believe what was going on, and we got these trees in, like our jujubes, decided to bloom and start flowering in January those years. And same with the persimmons, they're blooming in January. Pomegranates are blooming in January. They just started growing without any winter down here. Now, they come from up north. So up north, where they grow them, there is some winter there in November and December. But over the years, having them here year after year, they don't need one. None of these trees actually need a winter to fruit. If they have no leaves on them and the weather's warm, they bloom. That's the key. So the one thing we have to do, the last 12 years, the winters haven't been cold enough to get the leaves off of apple trees. They're going, okay, it's not winter yet, it's not winter yet. We're down in the 40s, it's not winter yet. You got to take the leaves off the trees, and then they'll start to bloom. Whereas the stone fruit plants, if we don't get winter, they just don't wake up. So what we mean by winter, so chill, it used to be 45 degrees or lower. now most accurate models say 55 degrees to 34 degrees Fahrenheit is where you get chill. It's not equal chill at 55 as it is at, so the maximum chill they've registered that you get is when the temperature is right around 45 or so. That's when the trees receive the most chill hours at that time, at that temperature. At 55, you don't get much. At 34, you don't get much. But you still get some chill at those hours. You don't get any chill when you go below freezing. So we do get a lot of temperatures that, our winters are generally around 55 degrees. But you also lose chill if you're above 65. So during winter, you can get some chill in November, and then it goes back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Because you have one good cool week, cloudy week, and you can pick up a lot of chill. Then you have one sunny week, and you lose a lot of it. So it goes back and forth. But you want to get to about, generally in our area, we'll average around 300 hours in the wintertime. Cumulative hours of this range here. So when the chill reaches 300 hours, and it may only reach it for a few days, then a lot of these trees start waking up and flowering and fruiting. Now, the problem with Orange County is that we have hills and low spots, and the thing to know about cold air is it settles. So in the wintertime on a night, the air is, in theory, colder with altitude, but it settles. So in Orange County, you've got the Santa Ana River, which is a lower basin, and then you've got some foothills and some canyons. The coldest areas in Orange County are Santa Ana River is one of them. The cold air just settles in there in the wintertime, and the canyon bottoms definitely get more than 300 hours of chill on average. The hilltops are the worst areas to be. And there's some areas near the coast that are on plateaus, like Costa Mesa Plateau. That's not a very good area, but anywhere that anyone within a few blocks of the Santa Ana River gets good chill, because that cold air is being drained down the Santa Ana River from all the surrounding hills and mountains, and the same in the canyons, Trabuco Canyon, a lot of canyons, Silverado Canyon, Laguna Canyon Road is a cold road. So hilltops, maybe as little as 200 hours, these low spots, 500 hours. There are, the University of California has temperature recording at a lot of their agricultural stations. There's one in Irvine, there's one in Costa de Casa, San Clemente, Long Beach. The one in Long Beach we know is right next to, I think it's the LA River. And that one records a lot of cold air because it's the LA River, big river. The one in Irvine gets very little chill. The one in Costa de Casa gets a lot of chill. Even the San Clemente one seems to be in a riverbed, gets a lot of chill there too. So that's the thing to know. So fruit trees, the stone fruit trees, you've got to buy the right ones for your neighborhood, or else you may not get fruit on them at all. Whereas these guys, you'll get fruit just about anywhere you grow them. Okay, when you plant them, well, Well, okay, one thing about chill, there are microclimates in your yard too. So if you've got a house, especially if you have a two-story house, even a one-story house will do it though, and this is south and this is north. In the wintertime, the north side of the house, the sun is coming at us extreme angle, and you get shade on the north side, which means you're going to get more chill there. The south side has actually got sun being reflected. South side of the house gets less chill than the north side by a lot. So the one thing we've noticed is that this is actually, the north side is actually a good spot to put your stone fruit trees. So trees, to get the fruit to ripen and sweeten, they need a lot of sun during the weeks when they're ripening. And the other nice thing about stone fruit, it ripens mid-year. Summertime, late spring into summer, when the sun's right at its highest. So if you put stone fruit, if you're in a marginally cool area now, we have a lot of customers living along the Santa Ana River Basin, and they don't have to worry about this unless they want to do unusually high chill stone fruit. But if you put the stone fruit on the north side of your house, and especially if you keep it short, they'll get a good chill in the winter. You know, north side, it may be 10 to 20% more chill than on the south side, which is substantial. But in the summertime, the sunlight's doing this. It hardly has any shadow beyond the eaves of the house on the summertime. So I've usually put my stone fruit on the north side of my house. And you can artificially get a cooler winter there, especially more than the south side. You put stuff like tropical stuff, bananas and star fruit, things that don't like it cold at all. Especially if you stick underneath the eaves. They stay real toasty on that side. Even the north side of trees, if you have a big shade tree over here, you can put your stone fruit on the north side of them. So you have microclimates in your yard too. If you're on a sloped area, so you have a fence like this, the cold air gets stuck behind that fence. During the 1990 freeze, when we hit 23 degrees throughout Orange County that year, we were in a nursery with a slight slope, solid fence at the bottom of the nursery. And when we noticed, we're looking at the frost damage we had because we hit 23, it was the top of the wall. All the plants below the top of the wall were frozen. Anything above the top of our solid wall were fine. It was really wild just looking at that. You can see the frost line matched the top of that solid wall. The wind's blowing, you don't get that much frost damage. When it's a cool, still night and you get severe frost, it settles. Okay, other thing to know about fruit trees, when you plant them, we do not, especially bare root, we do not use any planter mix. If you have soil, whether it be clay or real sandy soil like this, do not amend it. The amendments being sold, the plants really don't like them at all. So the planter mixes that everyone sells, which are ground up trees in general, sometimes with manure, that doesn't belong in the dirt. The orchards know, Dave Wilson tells all of the orchards that buy trees from them, do not amend the soil. It's really bad for the trees. The only time you have to modify your soil is if you have some plants that need really good drainage. Cherries need good drainage. Persimmons need good drainage. If it's a low spot, you got to build it up. Just pile more dirt in that location to get the drainage better. But most of the other fruit trees, if they sit in a puddle of water all winter, they don't seem to be affected. So best not to amend the soil, even if you've got clay. Clay is fine the way it is. If you amend it, you make it deadly. If you use compost to amend it with, it makes it pretty bad. Now, if you're going in pots, your options are either pure sand or the soil we make, our top pot, which has no compost in it. This is what we grow all our fruit trees in. So this is like real dirt. It's mostly quartz. So soil in nature is sand, salt, and clay, and that's pretty much 95% quartz, silicon dioxide. The soil we make is 65% silicon dioxide. I don't know of any other potting soil company that does anything close to this. But sand is 100% silicon dioxide, and that works just fine. I will say that there's a company in Texas now, Baacto, B-A-A-C-T-O, that sells a soil that's very similar to ours. They actually put sandy loam in it, so it's got to be real heavy. But that's the only one I know of in the United States that has soil that'll work well for years. Most potting soils might be able to grow one of these trees for 3 or 4 months, and then as they decompose down to sludge, then a lot of things start having trouble. So get the soil right. Generally, if you put them in native soil, they do not need a stake. There might be a few plants that you'd want to stake, but generally the ground is much more supportive when it's real dirt than a stake would be. And the roots, roots go out in all directions. So when we get a bare root tree in, generally we'll have some branching. They're grafted so we have a bud union, and then the rootstock will be pretty much about 1 foot wide and not quite 1 foot deep. So it'll look pretty much like that. When you put them in the ground, the area where they're grafted, you can see on this apple tree, well, this one you can see easier. This tree was grafted right there to this rootstock. And most of the grafts are done 3 to 4 inches above ground level. Some are done higher, but most of them are done 3 to 4 inches above ground level. So when you put them in the ground, you want it to be about like that. Now, most farms, when they plant these trees, I was told it takes about a minute to plant each tree. So they're going, a farm's got to plant 1,000 trees a day. So they said they have 2 guys with shovels that dig the hole. One guy sets the tree in, the 2 guys fill it up. They're done in less than a minute. I think they said might be even 20 seconds. They can plant these. So you don't have to be all that. Now, what we do recommend is when you first plant them, and the soil's not muddy, if it has been raining for a lot, some years we don't have to water them, but when you first water them, make a little basin out of the dirt and fill up with water. And then what I tell people to do is that first watering, hold the trunk straight, because as the first watering is settling the soil, sometimes they'll curve a little bit, settle unevenly, and you can't make them straight again. It's real hard unless you put a stake on them. Or, what you can do is get this thing nice and muddy again and then kind of vibrate the stem and get it centered again. But first watering, I like to hold the trunk, make sure it stays straight as the soil settles around it. The lesson I learned in the first bare root tree I planted. Hold that trunk straight. The other thing you can do, so most of they always graft the side of the rootstock. They graft them on one side. So there is a possibility that the sun can burn this area right here. where it's got this slope. So usually what we do, so if you have a choice, you face the grafted side, the scion side, toward the sun so the sun can't hit anything. I've only seen it burn it once, but when I had it facing the sun this way, I had a little burn mark here because that spot overheated. And generally, if the tree's real healthy, the water going up the trunk is keeping that area cool enough it doesn't burn. But I have seen it in the past burn this particular spot. So they do recommend facing the graft toward the sun, toward the south. Sometimes the top is shaped such that you don't want to do that. And then you just put a little white paint or some tape over that, duct tape to keep it from burning. So nothing in the ground. Fertilizer-wise, we always fertilize in containers. The farms apparently don't fertilize the first year. They said there's enough nourishment stored in the bare root plant to grow about 3 or 4 feet. And the farms really don't want to grow 10 feet the first year because they have no wind breaks. Or most farms, the wind is more of a problem than anything else. And they don't want too much of a canopy so that the trees start blowing around too much. So they don't usually fertilize them the first year. We fertilize them in containers. Containers don't hold any nourishment at all. And we'll often fertilize them twice in the pot the first year. This apple tree was only fertilized once. But usually for doing a lot of trimming, we'll fertilize twice. And you know, in your home you can fertilize it, just watch it so it doesn't get too big in case the Santa Anas in the fall are real nasty. Now recently all our Santa Ana winds have come after the leaves have pretty much gone. So it's not been as critical, but sometimes we'll get Santa Anas early fall and these trees can blow around a lot if you have a big canopy on them. Okay, the other thing to know about trees is most orchards are keeping their trees smaller. So in the old days, we're talking 50s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, even into the 80s, the average fruit tree was trained as an open vase, say 12 to 15 foot tall and 15 to 20 foot wide. So that's how we did it. There's a lot of books, old books around that say this way. And this is kind of what the tree wants to do naturally. But nowadays, they tell the farmers, if you can keep your tree a lot smaller, 5 foot wide, 8 foot tall, you'll have a more productive farm. And the reasoning for that is apparently the sunlight can only go through about 30 inches of leaves. You have a 15 to 20 foot wide tree, the production area on this tree is essentially like this. And the production area on this tree is the whole tree. So on this tree, we've got a lot of spots in here that aren't productive because they're in the shade. There's too much foliage on top of them. Now, when you plant them, when you keep them smaller, you need more trees. So the expense is higher initially, but you're more productive. The advantage to that for homeowners is variety. You can get more different kinds of fruit. You'll have more production during the year on top of that. I mean, when I had, my first plum tree I grew this way because this was how we were taught in the early 80s how to grow plum trees. And when that thing had fruit on it, I had about 300 to 400 plums, and I had 3 weeks to eat them. It's like, okay, you give away 95%, well, 99% of your crop you're giving away because you just can't eat that much. I remember when my dad's Santa Rosa plum produced one year, I ate about 4 or 5 of them, and we had to make fruit leather out of the rest because we just had too many. Whereas if you keep them 5 foot wide and 8 foot tall, you're probably less than 100 fruit on that tree, and you have the same 3 weeks to eat them. Well, you can just have more different trees with more different harvest periods, and you can make better use of your garden. This requires more pruning. This requires less pruning. But we've noticed that if you keep pruning these to this size, you might have to get out there 3 times a year to keep them pruned to that size. After a few years of doing this, 3 or 4 years of doing this, they stop trying to grow big. They're just staying small. So initial work is higher. So what we do recommend nowadays is space your trees about between 7 to 10 feet apart between trunks to get this size in. Whereas this we're spacing 25 feet apart, which is 25 square footage under 25. That's pretty big. It's around 400 square feet per tree this way, and this is a lot smaller, 5 foot, 20 square foot. The first house I owned, I didn't know this at that time, and because I wanted a lot of fruit trees, I was planting them 7 feet apart and trimming them just like this, and it turned out to be the proper way. Now, there are other methods. So Dave Wilson Nursery, if you get on their website, has done a lot of research on keeping the trees small, and one of their other methods they have is to grow the trees like a hedge. So they found that every tree that they sell, most of these here are what they sell, you can hedge them at 4 feet and they'll fruit. So let's tell you to put them, they tell you to put them 3 feet apart and just grow them like a hedge. And they have pictures of yards done that way, where they just plant them 3 feet apart, hedge them during the summer months. That's when you do that severe pruning. Most of these fruit trees, especially the stone fruits, they only grow spring and summer. They don't grow fall or winter. And during the fall, whatever is there in the fall will store energy to make the flowers and fruit for next year. So you want to cut them in the summer before they start storing the energy. So you cut them, keep them hedged all summer long, and then don't touch them height-wise. You know, in wintertime we do some thinning, but Dave Wilson claims you can just hedge them in the summer with shears, keep them at around 4 foot tall, and they'll fruit next year. The other method Dave Wilson had, if you look from above, was to plant up to 5 trees within 2 foot of each other, let's say 18 inches, and grow them as one tree that was 10 foot. It looks better, of course, if they're all the same kind. So I've done that with apple trees, with peach trees. Peaches combined with nectarines, plum trees. You just put them real close together and grow them as a group so that each tree makes up one section. And what we found, and what Dave Wilson found, is they don't do a lot of crossing branches. Each tree kind of stays in its own sector. It's just like a single tree. This tree has got 3 main trunks. They don't really know that they are the same tree, but they generally will grow out away from each other. They go for the sunlight. So you don't get a lot of crisscrossing branches within 3 to 5 or more trees. Well, 5 is the max they recommend. You don't get many crisscrossing branches in there unless you have a bully. Sometimes you have well, they say use the same rootstock, and generally they're all the same vigor. Because I had an apple tree once that was on standard rootstock. You don't want an apple tree on standard rootstock to be mixed in with apple trees on semi-dwarf. The standard one wants to take over the whole group. So you can do that. You won't have to do as much trimming as this. They will grow in their own sector like a normal tree. And just because you put 5 together, they suddenly can't grow twice as big. They still will grow their normal size. So I've done that in several houses I've lived at. And that works well. I've done this. I don't like it as much. And I've done this where you just keep each tree real small. So a lot of options there to get the squeeze trees in your yard. Now we did this at the largest yard I own. We did this. At that time we wanted the yard to look more like a yard than an orchard. So we put the trees in groups. We had roses and lilies and bulbs planted all around them to make it look more like a regular garden rather than like an orchard.
Gary, I have a question. I have a plum tree. I have a plum tree that grows very vigorously during the summer, and they have like these water sprouts that shoot straight up. Do you usually clip those down low, or do you just trim them at the top?
Well, you want them to be well spaced. So, like, the question was the plum tree. The plum trees we want just to have a nice fan shape. So
it's pretty established. It's just that during the summer it just grows.
Yeah, you can clip those off.
Okay.
The water spouts, they're just, you have this nice fan and suddenly you get this branch that you shoot straight up. You clip that out or cut it real short. If you keep cutting it short, it'll be a fruiting branch eventually. So, yeah.
On the group, how far northeast is the trunks and pitch that?
When you have the group,
Yeah.
Dave Wilson initially said 24 inches between trunks, and they went down to 18.
18? Sure.
I put them 6 inches apart before. 6 inches is too close. Well, it was okay. So I put them like this far apart, 4 trees, and what happened was they were so one-sided, the fruit was so one-sided that they started leaning away from each other. So I just tied them together. It wasn't a big deal. I just put a rope around them, tied the trunks together so they wouldn't lean any further, and they lived their entire life that way.
And they're not competing for resources.
Well, they're probably all grafted together in the root zone, so they're sharing.
Nice. Okay.
Generally, in your garden and in nature, once the plants have been there for a few years, all the roots are fused, so they kind of share.
I've tried that, and then one of them tends to not grow as big. The other 2 are more vigorous, and one in the back is kind of less.
Yeah. So when you do a group of 4 or 5, you want to make sure the ones in the back wake up quicker than the ones in the front. So, if they have definite chills on them, or if you just know them well, you know which ones will wake up first. make sure the one in the front isn't waking up first, because it'll shade the ones behind it and make them stunted. So that one you'd probably have to ask me, because we've seen them over the years. We know which ones kind of wake up first. But yeah, that is one problem with the one in the back. Okay, let's see. Water-wise, they all like ample water. So what we mean by that, in nature and in orchards and in your garden, most of the plant roots go down about a foot. Max, if you have real sandy soil, 1.5 feet. And when they're in production mode, that is if they're flowering or the fruit is sizing up, or if you just want them to grow fast, you've got to keep this entire root zone moist. And the only way to tell, really, because, well, there are professional moisture meters that you install in the ground. That's what they do in some orchards. They have this atmospheric negative thing that they stick in the ground, not the electric moisture meters that you buy. Those things aren't accurate at all. But if you get a stick, say pencil thick to about the thickness of your finger, if you can push in the ground a foot deep by hand, you're wet a foot deep. If you can push in 1.5 feet, you're wet 1.5 feet. In Oregon, they say with the apple trees, apple orchards, they want to be able to push that thing in 5 feet. And they get enough rain in Oregon to do that. We don't get enough rain here to get the ground wet that deep, but I do remember one year, 1998, we had 35 inches of rain, and my yard was total clay, and I had a stick, a rebar that was about 4 foot long, about this length. I can push it all the way in the ground, in the middle of my lawn. I couldn't believe it. That's the only year I've ever seen that. The soil wet that deep. But, you know, if you have soil that wet, the trees just love it. So be aware that overwatering is not an issue. Overwatering is a term developed by the agricultural agents when they couldn't figure out why trees were rotting in the late 80s when we switched to a compost-based soil. So virtually all nursery plants nowadays are grown in compost. And if you keep compost wet, there's no oxygen around the roots, they just rot. So you have to let the compost dry out. If you don't use compost around the roots, you can keep it wet. Before we knew that, every summer, a lot of our trees would start turning yellow and orange if we watered them every day. But now, once we switch to the right soil, they just stay green until it's time for the leaves to drop. Okay, so maintain moisture for at least the time before you pick the fruit. Once they pick the fruit, a lot of the orchards are allowed to go fairly dry. You don't really want them to grow a whole lot after the fruit's off. Okay, I think I've covered. So the most important, with orchards, the most important things, the most important pesticides that we use, number one is probably oil. Which just smothers bugs, and it also controls mildew quite well on the foliage. And this is most of the oils that we sell. Well, all the oils we sell are considered organic. Well, are used in organic orchards. They're not organic, but some of them are not organic. but they're used in organic orchards because they kill things and then they evaporate and they're gone, so they don't stick around. And then we use a lot of spinosad, which is an organic sourced pesticide, which kills chewing insects really well, plus thrips. And then on peaches and nectarines and nectarplums, copper fungicide in the wintertime. I'm sure that's not truly organic, but it is used in organic gardening because it's an ancient fungicide. It's been used for thousands of years. And I guess they don't have to, I would think they'd make that in a lab. But anyway, it's considered organic. And then last but not least, we got to get rid of the ants, and we don't have an organic ant killer. If you have ants climbing your tree, you usually have either scale, whitefly, mealybugs, or aphids on that tree. The ants we have here that most people have are not native ants. You got to get them out of there. The Argentine ants, even some of the natives farm sucking bugs. They actually move them from someone else's yard to your trees. They shoo away the ladybugs and the lacewings and all the good bugs from eating them because the sucking bugs excrete sugar water, which is the ants' main food. So they create a mess if they're in your yard. So get rid of the ants. We used to have, quote, an organic an ant control that was being used in organic orchards, but that company shut down during the pandemic, and we've never seen them come back, unfortunately. Okay, so pest control, not too difficult.
Question here. So if you get rid of the ants, then are you essentially getting rid of all those other pests?
Yes,
They can't
generally if
survive
you
without-
get rid of the ants, the other pests aren't a problem. So things like aphids, whitefly, scale, mealybugs, they're not a problem. You can still get them briefly, but the ladybugs just come and clean them up. If there's no ants to protect them, those bugs are sitting ducks for, especially ladybugs. They'll clean them up real fast. So we'll still get the bad bugs, but they're not there very long. But if you have the ants in your yard, they're there all the time. And this year was nasty year for ants and all, especially scale this year, which we use oil to kill it, but if you didn't have the ants, you wouldn't have to do it. Okay, so that's pest control. So if you looked at the list of trees we carry, what's very interesting is that we carry more apples than anything else. So apples, even though they, quote, have a chill requirement, they'll still fruit if they don't get it, which is very interesting. So we first heard about that fact when we read in the 1980s about the Philippines were growing apples in the mountains in the Philippines. The mountains of the Philippines, they said, have never recorded temperatures below 57. So it's tropical climate. Anything 57 above or 55 and above is considered tropical. So they never get any chill at all in the Philippines, yet they're growing Rome Beauty apples. And what they said they did is that when they harvested the apples, they wait 2 weeks and then strip all the leaves off. And 2 weeks after they strip the leaves off, they would bloom again. Because in order to get the leaves back, the flower buds open up too. So if it's 80 degrees, they're growing. They're not sitting around, they're growing. And so they start another crop. And in the Philippines, generally it takes 4 or 5 months for the crop to ripen, and then they can do it again, strip them down. So they can make them fruit any time of the year they want, just by stripping off leaves. Now, we can't quite do that here because we're too cool in the winter to develop a crop at that time and to bloom. So without a chill, so like this apple tree here maybe need 500 hours chill, which we never get. But it'll wake up when we hit around 75, 80 degrees. And the nights aren't too cold. So the nights are in the upper 50s, lower 60s. Then the tree says, okay, the weather's fine, we're growing now. So most of the apple trees here wake up around May or June. Sometimes they're July, but usually May and June, they're in good bloom. And the fruit ripens later than it would in Oregon. So if you're in Oregon, this tree would probably wake up in April. Plenty of chill in Oregon. As soon as we get anything near decent weather, they're up and going. So typically April, and then the fruit ripens in October, November. Here, the apples wake up when it gets warm, May, June, and sometimes they're still blooming in July, and then the fruit ripens closer to winter because they wake up late here. But the beauty of apples is that they don't usually ripen in summer like a lot of fruits do, so they got plenty of time to develop their fruit. So pretty much every apple we've grown, except for one, has a good crop here. And unfortunately, the one apple we can't recommend, at least in Orange County, is Honeycrisp, which is a lot of people's favorite apple. Now it does wake up here and it does produce fruit, but Honeycrisp is a summer ripening apple, and that's the problem it has. So it wakes up late because it's from Minnesota, needed 1,000 hours of chill, so it wakes up kind of late. Usually we get bloom on it early July when we grown honey, because we grew it for 10 years just to see. And the fruit ripens in late August. So you've got 5 or 6 weeks for the fruit to develop. So we were getting apples on Honeycrisp about that size. You know, if you put a magnifying glass on them, they look just like the apples at the store. They're yellow with the red blush. They tasted just like the big guys, but they couldn't size up because they only had 5 or 6 weeks to develop. The coldest winter we had when we were trying Honeycrisp was 2007, I believe. It was either 2007 or 8, and they bloomed a month earlier, so they got almost as big as an apricot that year. Now, what's interesting is, so in Irvine, so Dave Wilson put all their apples at an orchard in Irvine, and they had that result. Honeycrisp and Liberty went size up. But in Riverside, they were full size, which is interesting. That's just, 10, 15 more miles inland. They sized up quite well. They woke up just a bit earlier in Riverside. Riverside's a little more chill and a little more heat in the spring, and they did real well. But unfortunately, we just don't do the Honeycrisp. But we do a lot of apples because the rest of them have done well.
Which ones have low chill?
So there's 3 apples with real noted low chill. There's Dorset Golden. There's Einschmier. And there's Anna. These 2 are from Israel. This is from the Bahamas. These wake up before winter ends. So Dorset Golden is usually the end of January, and both of these, I think, are the beginning of February, real close to those. So they're real early to wake up. They don't need any winter at all, it seems. And they ripen early summer. or late spring. Around here, I don't recommend Dorset that much. Now, if you live further inland, it's better. But Dorset ripens mid-June, and what we're finding, and Einschmier may be similar, mid-June. If they ripen that early and we got cloud cover, they're tart, really tart. My former in-laws grew them in Hemet. They're good in Hemet. That more desert-like condition. They got the early heat. They got good and sweet there. But locally in Orange County, these are a little early, being in June. Anna's July, so it usually is quite good. I do, to me, Anna's one of the best apples that I've eaten and grown. The problem with the early apples, so these are considered the early apples, is they have no hang time and no shelf life. Whereas this is Pink Lady, great hang time and great shelf life. So Pink Lady usually ripens for us late November, December. You can leave it on the tree till March. Nothing happens to it. It stays nice and firm and sweet all the way through winter. And a lot of the late apples do the same thing. They've got good hang time, good shelf life. The early apples, poor hang time. Like an apple is a 3/4 red apple. If you wait till it's totally red, it's already mushy. At 3/4 red, it's perfect. What you can do to keep it from getting mushy, because if you pick an anna and you leave it on your kitchen counter for 2 days, it's mush by that time. If you put it in a Ziploc bag, squeeze out the air so there's no oxygen in the bags, throw it in the refrigerator, you can hold for 2 months. And that's how commercially they hold apples. You just put them in a container without any oxygen and they don't ripen. They say they can hold Fuji apple for 18 months that way. It's the longest holding apple. So some of the Fuji apples at the store you buy may have been in a storage unit for 18 months. They fill with carbon dioxide and it won't ripen. The advantage that the early apples have is they can make more than one crop a year. So most apples, wake up late, they only have time for one crop. These guys, like I've had some customers say there ain't apple fruits year round. And I've seen that at my house where almost any month you can go out there and find a few apples on the tree because it doesn't follow the seasons very clearly. Now, commercially, all apples have pollinators, 2 different cultivars that they put together to make better fruit. What we know is that if you only have one apple tree, there's fewer seeds in the apples. And sometimes that results in a flat-sided apple. So you get better quality fruit if you have more than one tree. We've never seen a single tree not produce those. So they will be quite productive, but the shape and the size sometimes suffers because of the number of seeds in the fruit. The Anna was always paired up with Dorset Gold. I didn't like the Dorset because it was so tart. I pulled it out. Mine apples, I noticed, I cut them open. There's only one seed on one side, and sometimes the other side was flat. But I didn't like the Dorset well enough to put it back in my orchard. So I just kept the Anna. I said, that's fine. Now, if you're in Oregon, you have to pair up the right apples. Like they would put in Fuji and Gala because they bloom at about the same time. But in Southern California, the apples other than Anna and Dorset, which we do sell, all ripen over an extended period of time. I mean, they bloom over an extended period of time. If you're in Oregon, because they get the chill up there, they said each apple blooms for 2 weeks. In Southern California, each apple blooms for 2 months because we don't have the definite chill. So parts of the tree wake up at different times, so they bloom over a long period of time. And it doesn't, other than and in Dorset, almost any of the other apple trees on the list will pollinate each other.
And is there what's the difference between us purchasing a bare root tree and just one in the pot?
Well, apples is not bad, but bare root is less expensive most of the year, and you can get some really gorgeous specimens bare root. Because sometimes we get them in there, and they say in a lot of the apple orchards they train them just like Christmas trees. And in bare root season, we do get some that are just perfect. You got tier branches here, tier branches here, tier branches there. Those are the ones, if we get them that way, we'll save them for our customers. So they've already got an apple tree that's been trained exactly the way you want it. And a lot of the bare root trees come in with a couple dozen flower buds already on the tree. I mean, it's just the first year. It's not that big a deal, but it's nice to have a big crop the first year. When I first started growing apple trees, in those days we'd get what looked like a fishing pole, and the average time it took to get the first apple was 3 to 4 years. I'm not sure exactly what the growers do nowadays to get them to branch out so nicely. Might be rootstock, might be some chemicals they spray on them while they're growing, but in the old days we just got fishing pole, and you had to cut them real short to start the branching. If you get something that looks like a fishing pole, you've got to cut it here to develop branches here, and then train one to go straight up again. Then you have to cut it there to get the branching there, and then train one straight up again. You have to do it in stages. Whereas now we get them all, we get some that are perfectly shaped. So. The one thing apples need that more than any other fruit tree is water. So that's the one bad thing about apples is they need the most water. I would tell you they need about the most water of any fruit tree. Guavas like a lot of water too, but apples, they like the soil to always look wet. If your soil looks dry, the apple tree is not happy at all. But you can grow just about, and you do have to thin them out. When apples bloom, they bloom in clusters of up to 10, and you only want one of those flowers to make a fruit. Because if you have a cluster of 10, they all break off. Now, pears, which are close related to apples, aren't as predictable. We're still working on what pears need. My favorite pear, Hosui. So over the years, we've had real good success with pears and real bad success with pears. And we just recently we're going, okay, we think we know what's going on now. So pears need some winter, it seems. They have a chill. But the thing they need most is a good spring warm-up. Like we had a lot of chill 3 years ago. It was one of the coolest winters. We were registering 380 to 500 hours of chill throughout Orange County that year. I think some areas got 800 hours, but there was no spring that year. It was just cool all the way through spring. I figured the pears were going to wake up and bloom really good because we had so much chill. Not a single flower in any of our pear trees. Yet the year before that, which was maybe 280 hours of chill, we hit 80 degrees in April, and the pear trees all bloomed really well, and we had a great crop on all our pears. We just couldn't figure it out. Less than 300 hours of chill, you had a real good bloom and real good fruit crop that year on our Asian pears and our hybrid pears. We don't grow too many of the European pears here, but we had a real good crop. Now the last 2 years have been cool springs, not cold, so we had a few pears both years. So it seems you need a good spring wake up. So if you're inland about 10 more miles, even 5 more miles, you probably have good pear crops there, especially if you're in a canyon area. Because they used to grow pear trees, I believe, in Silverado Canyon. They had pear orchards in the high deserts. Pears ripen in summer, and that's one of the problems. I mean, when I was a kid, my dad had Bartlett pear tree. Bloomed every year, made fruit, grew that big, because pears ripen in summer. So it didn't have enough time to develop. They would just be these real tiny pears. But if you have a good spring warm-up, so my best pear years were the late 80s. We'd have a frost in those years, but we had the hots. I remember 80 degrees in February those years. We'd have frost in the winter and then a quick warm-up. And my Asian pears and my other pear trees were blooming and fruiting. And then we stopped having those hot springs, and then they stopped producing. We didn't carry Asian pears for a long time again because we thought they needed more winter. But when they fruited 4 years ago, that wasn't that cold a winter. It was just a hot spring. So inland is better. You're taking a bit of a chance, especially if you're on the coast with pear trees. Now, apples and pears, just so you know, they naturally try to grow this way. And if you let them do that, the only place where they have enough light to make fruit is at the tip of each branch. So you want to train them, force the branch to go horizontally, and then you'll get short branches all along here that will also have flower buds on them. But if they are allowed to grow on their own, each branch goes straight up, and they just have flower buds on the tip of each branch.
And are you using spreaders to do that?
Spreaders, stakes, weights, you got to get them flat.
The summer pruning for that?
Pardon?
Shape the summer?
Pretty much all year, yeah, you just keep shaping. Now, the last 20 years, our suppliers offered shaped apple trees as espaliers. This year, they didn't let us reserve any. For some reason, there weren't any on the list. So we'll probably have to pick them up in January when we get our next availability sheet out. But apples are really easy to espalier when you get them because the branches for a few years are like rubber. So you can, the espaliered apples run about, last year we sold them for 80. And these we sold for 45. I think all these this year are 49. No, 54, 59. Okay, they really went up. And the Espaliers may be closer to 100. I haven't seen the price list on them. So it's easy to take most apple trees and espalier them, which is what a lot of commercial orchards do too. Is they, instead of training them, so some apple orchards trim them like Christmas trees, and some apple orchards train them as espaliers on fences. Enough on apples. The most maintenance of all the fruit trees tends to be peaches and nectarines. And interestingly, one of the relatives would be the lowest maintenance. So apricots, cherries, and plums and their relatives tend to be low maintenance, peaches and nectarines high maintenance. So the reason for that, now one thing about peaches and nectarines is that we do have cultivars that do well here. Like Mid-Pride may be our best peach because the chill requirement of this is low enough. We have not seen it miss a year, ever. Yeah, it's probably missed 2014. That was a terrible year, 2014-15. But for the most part, you'll see fruit on it every year, and it ripens in early summer. So it's got all these advantages going for it. But it is high maintenance because peaches, the entire branch only fruits one time. So you're cutting off lots of wood to keep. I mean, if you didn't prune a peach tree at all, every year it grows a new branch and it fruits, and then it grows a new branch off of that and it fruits. You'd have to let it get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger to keep getting fruit off it. So what they do in orchards is once that branch fruits, they just cut it off and regrow the branch. So a lot of work because the same part, it has to grow essentially 1 to 2 feet to fruit. Whatever branch grew 1 to 2 foot last year is a perfect fruiting branch. Whereas apple trees and pear trees, what they do is the ends of the branches fruit, but they develop a lot of short branches. Like this is a short branch here. Where these 2 leaves is this the beginning of another short branch there. Here is a real short branch here that's only 1/4 inch long. Here's the start of a short branch here. These are called fruiting spurs. They develop fruiting spurs all along these horizontal branches that'll fruit every year for the next decade or more. So, once you have the basic structure down, you don't have to touch it. Clip off the ends, clip off the top, but the fruiting part of the tree is going to be the same for the next 10 years or so. The same thing with apricots, cherries, and plums is they develop short branches in the interior of the tree that'll produce fruit every year. Peaches and nectarines, you got to grow a 1 to 2 foot branch to get fruit. Now you can have some short branches making fruit, but they don't make very good fruit. So if you want the best peaches and nectarines possible, you have to grow branches. The University of Pennsylvania, I think it was, or it might have been Ohio, said that the best fruit is on branches that naturally grew over the last year 1 to 2 foot long. That's your best quality fruit. So you have to do a lot of pruning work on peaches and nectarines to keep them both small and best quality fruit. Now you can just cut them, and if there's still leaves on the tree after you cut them, you'll get flowers and fruit the next year. But if you're on real short branches, you'll have smaller fruit, which is not that big a deal. I mean, you're not trying to sell these to a supermarket. If you get a peach this big, it'll still be good. Rather than, a peach that big, which is what the supermarkets want. So it's up to you, but peaches and nectarines got lots of pruning.
So are you saying that like the best way would be to take everything back to the trunk and then that would just grow out the new fruiting wood?
Well, not at one time because you won't get fruit at all. So what the growers are doing, they're trimming every other branch off, real short, so it regrows, and then they have an alternate branch next to it that's fruiting. Now, in Southern California, we got enough time that you can actually, right after the fruit's off in July, you cut that branch real short, and it'll regrow that same year and fruit next year. I've done that. So you can cut it, because fruit trees are programmed to grow all spring and summer. Those are the 2 seasons. All spring they grow, all summer they grow. fall, they stop growing and store energy. So if this fruit is ripe and this fruit ripens early summer, you can cut that branch almost to its stump, and it'll regrow that same year and have fruit the next year. So I've done it that way, or else if you're lazy, just do it in the wintertime. You cut every other branch back and save the ones you want to fruit. You have to save what you want to fruit in the wintertime. Space is about a foot apart on the branches. So peaches and nectarines, lots of work if you want the best quality fruit. Plus, they need the most spraying of any fruit tree. You have to spray pretty much everything here. You've got to spray on the peach or nectarine to get a good crop. They're the main fruit that gets worms without spraying. And they get, both peaches and nectarines get peach leaf curl disease if you don't spray copper on them. So they require at least 3 sprayings during the year. Whereas with apples and apricots and cherries, you can get away with no spraying at all, just control the ants. However, the nice thing about peaches, real reliable. If you get the winter they need, they're going to fruit that year. All the literature says that with the peach, you know what you're going to get. You get the winter they need, you get the fruit. With plums, pluots, cherries, it's sometimes you feel, okay, we're going to have a great crop, and they don't do it. They said those guys are more mysterious. They're not as reliable. Peaches, they said, are like your mom. They're very reliable. Nectarines like your sister, needs more work. And they said plums and the other ones are like your girlfriend. They used a worse term than that, but anyway, so apricots, cherries, plums, pleuries, and pluots, you basically shape them like a fan. Peaches and nectarines, usually you have more than one trunk. You can use this one trunk, but it makes it hard. 2 or 3 upright trunks are up to 4. And then everything else is horizontal. Fruit forms on horizontals. "50 years ago, they used to train peaches and nectarines into 16 uprights. So 16 uprights and everything else horizontal. So you had this. They said the problem with that, having 16 uprights, is it took them 5 years to train this. Peaches, nectarines, they found your best crop, statistically on peaches and nectarines, you cut the trees down and replace them in 13 years. Because apparently they make their best fruit when they're less than 10 years old, and beyond 10 years, it's declining they said by the 13th year, you just take them out because they're not producing as well as they used to, and statistically, it's better to grow something else. And this took 5 years to train. That takes almost half the time of the fruit tree's life to train it, so they go with fewer trunks now. The reason they don't use one single trunk like we do in apples, they said if you have one single trunk on a peach or nectarine, sometimes those branches are so vigorous, they grow too long and they won't fruit. So you have to let more than one trunk grow to get some of the vigor down on a peach. We don't grow any of the dwarf, so there are genetic dwarf peaches and nectarines. The quality of those fruits are not good enough. We haven't found a good low chill dwarf peach or nectarine that was worth growing. I grew some one year and I tasted it going, I'm not eating these. They were and the catalogs will tell you comparable to commercial quality, which is what you don't want to grow. You don't want to grow commercial quality fruit. Cherries, we're still trying to figure out which cherry to recommend the most here. And the only one we don't know well is we're carrying six cherries. Lapines, Mini Royal Crimson, Royal Lee. That's for this 4. I thought I had Brooks too. I have Brooks out there right now. So Lapines has been a very reliable producer in my yard. It's from Canada. It had no business being in Southern California, but I grew it just to try it 30 years ago, late 80s. And it produced on its second year. And every time I planted Lapines, it's produced on its second year. It's supposed to be a self-fertile tree, but it's never produced heavily. So we think Lapines is, like a lot of fruit trees, partially self-fertile. If you have another tree along with it to bloom, it'll make a bigger crop. We brought in Brooks for that purpose, but we haven't had Brooks bloom yet, so we're still waiting for that one. Dave Wilson is telling us to recommend Royal Crimson as a self-fertile, low-chill cherry. Problem is we haven't eaten one yet. We've been growing it for 11 years now. Have not seen a fruit on it yet. So we're going, okay. It wakes up early, so we know the chill on it's low, but we haven't eaten fruit on this. So it's like, okay, can't recommend it too highly yet. But Royal Crimson is supposed to be a combination of self-fertile and low chill. There's Mini Royal, which we've eaten fruit off of, and Royal Lee, but they need each other and they're not blooming real well together. So they brought in Royal Crimson to pollinate both Mini Royal and Royal Lee and to be self-fertile on its own, but we just haven't eaten one yet. So it's like, okay. We're still waiting on the plums. Cherries, that is. And plums, we haven't had much cold lately, so the plums haven't done real well for us. Of the plum-like fruit, the one that's done the best for everybody is Candy Heart, which is a plury, a plum cherry hybrid. Plury. It needs a pollinator, so we usually combine it with Sweet Treat. What's interesting thing about Candy Heart, when the fruit is first, it holds well on the tree in July. When you pick it early, it tastes like a cherry. If you leave it on there for a month or more, it tastes like a plum. But this is one of our best-selling stone fruits because this one's never missed. The years we've had it, it's never not bloomed well. The chill on it seems to be well below 300 hours.
Can another plum be a pollinator too?
Yes, but it's got to bloom.
Oh.
The plums are usually 300 plus, and this is well less than 300 hours. So some years we get, like, what was it? About 5 years ago, the winter was warm. We had a real cool February, March, and all the plums and pluots and pluries bloomed at the same time that year because we had all the chill at one time. This year, November was cool, December was cool, and then it was real spotty the rest of the winter. And Candy Heart bloomed well before Sweet Treat, well before the other plums and pluots. So we didn't have very good fruit set on it. But most years, these two bloom right on top of each other. And then the plums come in later. Some of the pluots are pretty low chill too. The apple supreme seems to bloom alongside this, and that might actually work as a pollinator too. The apple supreme pluot. And then you have beauty plum, which is the lowest chilled plums. That might also work. But with plums and pluots and pleuries, the more you have in your yard, the better the chances of getting pollinated, because the pleuries and the pluots need a pollinator. None of the plums do. Okay. Let's see. So jujubes are one of the more interesting fruit trees. They're from Asia, well, along with everything else. These are Chinese jujubes, so there are jujubes native to other parts of Asia, but this is a Chinese jujube. If you haven't had one before, they taste like an apple, a little more tender, but they have an apple flavor, and they're at least double or triple as sweet. So a lot of jujubes are grown just, you dry them and use them as a sweetener. But real high sugar content, G866 is one of the sweetest ones. They don't need any chill. And they also are the only fruit tree we know of that flower on new growth. So I had to try it. I had a G866. That was about 10 foot by 6 foot. And they said in the third world countries, they use the entire tree. So they, have this tree that makes about 20 pounds of fruit, harvest it, sell it. 2 weeks after they fruit, well, generally with jujubes, after the fruit's off, the leaves start deteriorating pretty quickly. They'll usually drop off and be bare by mid-October, late October. So they said 2 weeks after they pick the fruit, they pick off all the foliage and feed it to their cattle. And then in winter, they cut the tree down to a 4-foot stump and use it for firewood. And so I had to try that. So I took my G866 and cut it down to 18 inches. And by the next July, it was back up above 5 feet, full of flowers and fruit. So the only fruit tree we know of that fruits on new growth. No other fruit tree will fruit if you cut it down to 18 inches that we know of. So real easy to control size. Jujubes are also interesting because their branches are not always permanent. So all these little branches will fall off in the winter. They do make nasty thorns on new growth, especially when they're young. As they get older, they don't. When I planted my jujube tree, this one at my last house, my son was only a few years old, so we cut off all the thorns on the trunk, and they never grew back, and I never grew any more thorns on the top either. So they get less thorny as they grow. The bad thing about jujubes is a root sucker. So, if you put a jujube in the ground, you don't touch the ground around it, generally they're okay. But if you want to plant flowers around it or bulbs and you dig a hole next to the tree, you cut through one of those roots, it grows a new tree. A lot of trees do that. Plum trees will do that. Plum roots do that. Poplar trees, aspen trees, birch, aspens, and poplars. You dig around them, and they start setting up all these trees from the cut roots. So you have to be careful with. So that's one bad thing about jujubes. Now, the little suckers that grow from those cut roots bloom and flower and fruit the first year. So what we know now is that most of the jujubes are partially self-fertile. Because when I took my G866 home, all the literature said they're self-fertile. So I put them in the yard of my house, and I made, this tree that was this big, 6-7 foot tall by 4 feet wide, made like 10 fruit. the trees at the store are fruiting much heavier. So I said, nah, it's not self-fertile. So I took home another Jujube in a pot, put it next to it, and the next year it had 300 fruit. So we know that some of them are not fully fertile. They do claim the original trees they brought from China, which were Li and Lang, are self-fertile. But most of the other ones that we sell are partially self-fertile. They'll make a fruit by themselves, but they need to be pollinated. Now again, root suckers can pollinate the top. The root suckers are genetically different. So if you allow one root sucker to grow and flower, it should pollinate the top. Or you just plant several. Jujubes ripen late summer through mid-fall. They don't ripen all at once. They have a fairly good long period of blooming and ripening. They're all really, really sweet. The sweetest seems to be honey jar, but it's also the smallest fruit. They grow about the size of a big marble. This G866 and one called sugar cane are also very sweet. Sugar cane's like that. G866 is like this. Li is like this, about the size of a chicken egg. And there's one called, we don't grow Lang. There's one called Shan Si Li, which is supposed to be even bigger. And then Chico State has one that's shaped like a pippin apple. So they all have kind of an apple flavor, all extremely sweet. We're not sure Shangxi Li is totally different than Li because they said Li comes from the province in China known as Shaanxi. So whether or not Shangxi Li and Li are the same, we're not sure. But they do claim Shangxi Li is 50% larger than Li. And they're both really sweet too.
Gary, I don't think I've ever had a Jujube. How highly would you recommend?
Depends how much you want sugar in the diet.
Okay. I got two little boys. You think they would?
Oh yeah.
Like it? Okay.
They have one seed in the middle.
Yeah.
Kind of the size of a date seed. So they call them sometimes Chinese dates because they look like dates. They're as sweet as dates. They taste like apple. Of course, dates taste a bit like apples too. Yeah, they are good. So mulberries have become one of our best-selling trees lately because they can crop more than once a year. This is weeping mulberry. This weeping mulberry, if left on its own, would be on the ground. It doesn't really have a trunk at all. So what the growers do is they grow these in the ground for a couple of years and they have to stake the stem up to get it big enough and stiff enough to be a tree-like look. And then from that point on, it just weeps to the ground. All the branches go straight down. And this one's a favorite in a lot of children's gardens. Huntington Gardens has one in their children's section. Disneyland had them for a long time. I don't know if they still do. But at a friend's house, you know, the canopy on it was about like this. And you could stand in the middle and hide because the branches weep to the ground and pick mulberries from the inside. So it's a good kid's tree. Mulberries are native all around the world. This tease weeping is a white mulberry. White mulberries are native. Most mulberries come from Asia, but there's quite a few mulberries native to North America. I don't know if there's any in South America. And they all have fruit about mid-year. However, we notice that all of them if they're mature, especially if they're mature trees, right after the first crop, if you strip the leaves off the branch, they want to regrow. In order to regrow, they have to bloom. So I've gotten the same branch on a mulberry tree to fruit 4 times in 1 year. Depends when they wake up. Some mulberries wake up early, some mulberries wake up late. So this year we're real happy to have Black Beauty. Anyway, we're not getting many, so if you want a Black Beauty grafted tree, this will be the year. But that is a Persian mulberry. Persian mulberries need heat, so they don't wake up early normally. It's one of the bigger, fatter mulberries. Mulberries taste like blackberries, and the Black Beauty has some bite to it, whereas a lot of mulberries are just sweet and bland. Black Beauty has got some bite to it. It's also a dwarf tree. This is a dwarfish tree. I mean, if you didn't stake it up, it'd be on the ground. But a Black Beauty may grow 12 to 15 foot on its own, and you can keep it shorter. So we're getting that for the first time in about 8 years. We're also getting some of these weeping mulberries, and we're getting a white version of this, a white Persian. We grow a lot of other mulberries ourselves. Pakistan, which is the mulberries that are as thick as your pinky and about 5 inches long. They look like red worms hanging in the tree. And we grow, that's the red Pakistan, the white Pakistan, which is kind of a yellow berry. We grow World's Best, we grow Maui ourselves. But bare root will be getting in the Black Beauty Persians, the white Persian, and the weeping one. It was a lot easier to get mulberries when we had 3 suppliers. Now that we only have 1 supplier, it's getting tough. What's interesting is that Dave Wilson Nursery, their main crop is almond trees. They sell more almonds than any other tree. And this year, for the first time in 3 years, we're getting almonds again. So if you want an almond, Garden Prince is the one we're carrying. That's low chill, self-fertile. The one bad thing about nut trees is if you have squirrels and birds, you don't get any of them. One of our customers said, I had 1 almond tree, I couldn't get anything, so we planted 5 of them to get, he says, the birds didn't eat all of them. We had 5 almonds. That's why orchards, you have 100 trees out there, 1,000 trees, the birds can't eat them all at once. But Dave Wilson grows more than half their inventory is almonds, and it does make sense. So where almonds were vilified in the past because it took, 50 gallons to make 1 almond, or whatever it was that they were claiming. The advantage that nuts have, well, for a farmer, the advantage nuts have is you don't have to pick them all at one time. Like if you're growing plums, your picking window is so short, you have to have hundreds of workers out there to pick all your plums in, say, 3 weeks. You got to have those trees cleaned off. You don't have any time. With almonds, you just let them fall on the ground and you vacuum them up. And the other thing, almonds have almost a endless shelf life. So almonds, you're going to eat every single one. If you harvest an almond, it'll probably get eaten. If you harvest a plum, how many of those will be eaten? Maybe a third? Because they don't have any shelf life. the stores will probably throw away more than half what they get, and you'll probably throw away half of what you pick. So almonds are actually more, the fact that they were vilified 20 years ago on television by all these news reporters doesn't make any sense at all. They're more likely to be eaten than any fruit. So the nuts, so a lot of orchards are pulling out their fruit trees and putting in nut trees because it's just, with the labor problems and all that, it's just easier.
There's a section of 99E just going into Red Bluff up north, and they have tree line road. People just park and sweep up some and drive on.
Yeah. When I lived in Texas, you stop by a side road, pick pecans off the ground. Pecans. Pecans grow here, and so do walnuts. We carry walnuts. Not all walnuts will grow here. Placentia is an English walnut with real low chill. The California black walnut, which is the native one to the canyons, won't grow in most of Orange County. It's not cold enough. They've got a chill requirement. Almonds have a chill requirement. This one we have enough chill for that one. Almonds are related closely to peaches and nectarines and apricots. Some people eat apricot and peach pits because they taste like almonds. Be very careful about that. I mean, my friends, when I was a kid, they used to open up the dried plums and eat the plum pits. And they taste like almonds. But be aware that the almond odor is cyanide. So if you eat too many of them, it can kill you or make you very ill. It starves your body of oxygen. So, almonds are safer to eat than peaches and plum pits, but they kind of taste all the same. So, that one young friend of mine didn't turn out real well, so I don't know if he might have ate too many of those. Let's see. So those are some of the nuts we're carrying this year. And then one of our top selling trees are persimmon. One of the few fruits I've got left on my trees. That's a type, we call these tomato-shaped ones the fuyu types. So there are fuyu type persimmons, and then there's the astringent, which are basically inedible till they're ripe. Whereas this one, you can eat it when it's still hard and firm. There's no tannins in it. So if you the fuyus are mostly shaped like tomatoes, and the astringent ones are mostly shaped like this, with the stem on this end. The original fuyu, which I ate when I was a kid in the 1950s, is no longer sold. So there's no proper persimmon now that's called fuyu. They have other names other than fuyu. The original fuyu had a few seeds. It wasn't quite as flat. It was a little bit rounded on the bottom, more so than the things we sell nowadays in general. But it had 2 or 3 seeds in it. I remember it had a few seeds in it. All the persimmons sold now are seedless. All the non-astringent. So the main ones are Jiro, Emoto, are the 2 that we would promote a lot that look like this, that are easy to grow and nice. This is Izu, which the fruit is excellent, but the trees are really weak. We don't recommend Izu that much. because we lose a lot of, I would say half the trees we lose. Now persimmons are one of the more delicate trees, bare root. When they grow these trees in the ground for a couple of years, they just plow them out of the ground with a special plow. And that action alone breaks a lot of the roots. And persimmons don't respond that well to damage. So we lose more persimmons every year than most other trees. Like with apples, we might lose 1 out of 500. With stone fruit, it's usually 0. We usually lose 0 stone fruit. Very few apples. Jujubes we tend to get a lot of tiny, skinny ones in, and sometimes those don't wake up. Persimmons, even some of the big ones we get, don't wake up properly. And Izu's the worst of them. So we don't promote it that much. But the nice thing about Izu, if you already have Jiro ripens in late October, Imoto ripens in late September. Izu, my daughter just ate her Izu. And it was way past ripe. I've eaten Izu in August. So Izu is a really early Fuyu type persimmon that's quite good. But getting the tree to get going is the big question mark. We lose a lot of Izus in the bare root process. Once they get going, well, sometimes even the second year we lose them. We can tell usually by the size of the leaves. If the leaves stay this big, we don't trust the tree. We said, okay, the tree still doesn't have good root system. Once the leaves get this big, we go, okay, this tree has probably got good roots. So it'll probably do fine the next year. I mean, on some of our persimmons out there, the leaves are this big. We like those. Once they get that big, we go, okay, that's a really good, healthy tree. And there's another Fuyu we sell called Giant. Giant, the trees do well, but they can be real frustrating. So if any of these other Fuyu type persimmon trees start making a fruit, they flower and the fruit starts forming, they usually hang on to it till it's ripe. The giant Fuyus are noted that they abort their crops when they're young. And I didn't know that. I had 2 giant, I love the fruit. So I put in 2 giant Fuyus, and on their 4th year, 3rd year, they had like 50 or 80 fruit that got to about this size in September, and they all fell off except for one. In November when they ripen, they're about as big as grapefruits. And I go, well, that was terrible. And the next year they did exactly the same thing. Dropped a whole bunch of fruit that were that big. And I couldn't stand it. I go, I just cut the trees down. I said, this is too frustrating. Then a friend of mine who had one for that was about 10 years older, says, about the 7th or 8th year they stop aborting. But all the literature says the same thing. The one we sell called Giant in Japan is called Gosho, and it is noted for aborting when it's young. Maddening tree. There's another one called Hana that's not supposed to abort. We tried those, couldn't make any of them grow. They all died. So we gave up on Hana, went back to Gosho. But just be aware, the first few years of fruiting, they're going to abort their crops. But they do have fruit that gets that big. So. But Jirinamoto will be at least this size, and they don't drop. They'll hang on, and the branches are all breaking off the tree. I mean, when I grew Imoto, my first house, 2 fruit the first year, 25 the second, 75 the third. Just crazy production on them. The astringent ones are Hachia, which is the main one you see at the supermarkets. Then we have chocolate, coffee cake, and Saijo. Deciduous is considered the sweetest of all the persimmons. Hachia, you have to let it get jelly ripe for it to be edible. Chocolate is one that blooms and makes seeds. None of these other ones have. Well, these two have these three have seeds in them. When chocolate makes a lot of male flowers and female flowers, it always has seeds. It's got a most persimmons, slight pumpkin flavor, cinnamon flavor, and pumpkin colored inside. Chocolate has got a lot of brown in it, and it does have some chocolateness to it. Coffee cake has swirls of chocolate in it, but it needs chocolate to pollinate it. If you don't have a chocolate persimmon next to a coffee cake, this will make fruit that's orange instead of chocolatey colored, and they are inedible. I had a tree once in my house. I had a lot of these other persimmons in my house. I said, someone's got to make a male flower, but they don't do it. So my coffee cake made like 80 fruit this big, bright orange, would never soften. I try all the tricks, put them in the fridge, freezer, to freeze them, and they wouldn't soften. They were just like rubber, couldn't eat them. But with the chocolate around, then they get seeds, they make the brownish swirls of flesh, and you get swirly, chocolatey flavor in your persimmon. Deciduous and hachia will produce by themselves. It's nice to have one of these in your yard just to train the animals that you can't eat persimmons. You put a hachia in your yard, and they're all orange, and the birds come and take a bite. You go, oh my God, you can't eat this stuff. And the squirrels and all the animals eat that thing, and they get that reaction. It just makes your mouth totally dry. Then you'll never eat a persimmon again.
So you protect your other kinds for that one?
Well, if it's fruiting first,
Oh,
because the animals try that one, and if it's not jelly ripe, it just it's interesting. If it's not jelly ripe, when you take a bite, even though it's wet, your mouth feels like it's full of dry flour. You can't talk. Even though it's wet, it's just so totally astringent, like super astringent wine. I mean, really way more astringent than wine ever gets.
because I haven't gotten it not astringent 2 or 3 years with our critters. I mean, they're starting out, well, they're still green.
Yeah. Hachia is quite astringent, so.
So I'm getting
Try it though.
Yeah. The food of the gods, a dried hachia persimmon, dried properly. That is one of the best tasting things you'll ever eat, texture-wise, flavor-wise. Some of our customers dry them out the proper way. I can't believe it. They do all that work. But some of them do it. But there are farms in the Central Valley that grow hachias just to dry them on properly. Or they massage them every week to keep them from getting hard. But what they do is they peel them and they hang them by their stems, and every week they massage them so they don't get hard on the outside. But what's happening is the juices come to the outside every time they do that, and you get this sugar coating on this thing, on the outside of the fruit. It's just amazing what it tastes like. Dried hachia persimmons, what do they call it? Hoshigaki. They sell it, I don't know, $20 a pound, $25 a pound on the internet. But that is good stuff. See if I've covered everything here. That's pretty much everything. Now, the top selling bare root we have, and you don't have to worry about reserving it because we buy so many of these, is the spicy nectar plum. That's our number one selling bare root fruit tree. think we've got 70 coming, so we don't usually run out of those. But that's a nectarine-like fruit that's quite reliable, really good tasting, very ornamental on top of that. So top selling bare root fruit tree. Any other questions today?
Yeah. Question. So around all my fruit trees at home, I have a lot of grass. Is there any disadvantage to having grass around the base?
Not at all.
No. Okay.
So if you have grass, what kind of grass is it?
I don't know the stuff that won't go away.
Bermuda.
Yeah.
Yeah, Bermuda's not a problem. The only grass that affects growth that's documented as tall fescue. So a marathon grass planted within 2 feet of the trunk will stunt the growth of the tree, which may or may not be a bad thing. And, grass needs the same amount of water as most of these fruit trees are. The fruit trees need a little bit less than the lawn does, but they don't mind it at all. So no problem with that.
Another question. I'm sorry. When choosing a tree from your store, do I need to be cautious and careful about the graft and whether or not? Because I've heard some places say that if the tree gets too heavy, it could break from that graft. Is that true?
Haven't seen it happen.
Okay, so I don't need to pick through and study the grafts.
Yeah, that's the lead. Now there are sometimes with persimmons when we get them, they're damaged right at the graft and they break off. But we usually find those before anyone else does. Or because that is a weak part on the tree, and the bare rooting processing can definitely damage the weak areas of the tree. So sometimes the persimmons come to us and they just snap off right here because of the processing. So it's the weakest area of the tree when we get them, but as they grow, I don't think it's an issue at all. We've never had anyone show us the tree that broke off at the graft.
It's just the internet is full of
No.
stuff that, pretty much you've debunked most of the stuff I read on the internet already today. So, yeah, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a really big, mature, probably 50 feet tall tree in the backyard, and then my neighbors also have really tall trees. So when I try to plant a tree in the ground, it doesn't seem to do well because I think it's sucking out water, from the roots. So I was thinking about using some kind of root barrier or maybe even plunging like a pot in the ground.
Mm-hmm.
Does that work?
Root barriers be better. So I've talked to some farmers that have the windbreak trees next to an orchard, 100-foot eucalyptus, and they said what they do is every 5 years, now you can put something permanent in the ground, but every 5 years they run a trencher 2 foot deep between the windbreak trees and their orchard to cut off all the roots, because those trees want 100 gallons of water a day, and just stealing the water from the orchard, and they don't need 100 gallons a day, but they'll take it if they can get to it. So they just trim off they just cut through the roots every 5 years to make it less problematic. But yeah, if you get a root barrier in the ground, they make 2 foot, but usually it's 18 inches. So you just dig a trench, cut off all the roots of that tree, between the tree and your other trees, and put a root barrier in there, and it takes a long time to get around that, to get back to that area. Since roots only go down about a foot and a half deep should be deep enough. You can make a trench full of concrete. That's another way you can do it. But or just run a trencher. You have to rent those, but run a trencher every few years. But yeah, the competition between trees, between the roots can be severe, especially if it's a big tree. Like in my last house, the green belt next to us, they planted pine trees in it that while we were there made it to 80 foot. And I couldn't grow anything on that side of the yard. Because the 80-foot pine trees, they're using over 100 gallons a day if they can get to it. And they're using my, in other words, I'd have to water the pine trees for the greenbelt people in order to get my plants to grow there. It just wasn't worth it. Now I could have run a trencher along that wall. I just never bothered to do that because those trees were that far off my wall. Just these, trunks this big. So yeah, competition from other plants can be pretty nasty. Half a day of sun is usually sufficient for all these trees. Full day is better, but half day usually works, just so you know. The University of Riverside did a study because they're wondering what happens in an orchard, fruit on the south side versus fruit picked from the north side. So they did that test on an orange tree. They said the north side of this tree, the fruit there never gets full sun at all. When they picked the fruit and ate it, they couldn't tell the difference. But they knew there had to be something different. So when they tested them chemically, the fruit on the south side had double the amount of nutrition as the fruit on the north side. So they had twice the sugars and twice the acids as the fruit on the north side, but no one can taste the difference. So if you're growing fruit for nutrition, you got to have more sun, but we don't need that kind of nutrition. We don't need all that sugar. So if you just grow from the enjoyment, a lot of these trees will grow a lot of good fruit in minimal sun. I mean, I've grown apple trees in almost total shade. Well, okay. So one note, the fruit trees that have the shortest hang time, the fruit that has the shortest hang time needs the most sun. And that's plums, peaches, nectarines. I don't think, and mulberries. I stuck figs in there. Figs have short hang time. Those trees need the most light to get the best quality. The trees with the longest hang time don't need it. So apples, grapes hang a long time. Pluots hang a long time. Pomegranates hang a long time. We've grown apples in almost total shade and they taste fine. Grapes in just about, I mean, when I was a kid, my dad grew grapes in the shade and they turned out fine. I didn't realize it at that time of the reason because they just hang on and hang on and hang on. Figs, though, I've always had them in half a day of sun. And when we had a growing ground in full sun, boy, the figs in full sun, a lot better flavor than the ones in half a day or less. They just get a lot more taste to them. So yeah, certain plants that have better hang time can go in substantial shade and turn out just fine. All right.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.